Hello Year 1 and Year 2, welcome back to English Lessons Live with me, Mr. Phillips. I hope you had a lovely week last week. Sorry I wasn't around, but we're back. It's Monday, so it's time to get right back on these English lessons again. So, should we get cracking straight on with it? Last week we were doing, the week before that we were doing some setting descriptions, and this week we're going to move on to doing some character descriptions. So the same kind of thing, but just making sure we're doing it with characters, not with setting, and that way we can have a little practice of all these different areas of writing. So, before we start off, shall we do a bit of a Assbag starter? Okay, and this is the one that I've got for us today. It says, draw lines to join two words that can become one word. One has been done for you, and they connected the words white and board to make the compound word whiteboard. What I want you to do is see what other three combinations you can make. Which of these words do you join rain to? Which of these do you join tooth to? And which of these do you join space to? And we've got paste, coat and ship there. What I'd like to do is try and join two of those words together to create one word, a compound word. Best way to do this, I'd say, is just to write the full word out. So what do you think number one is? What do you think number two is? And what do you think number three is? Have a little pause of the video there and see if you can combine these words with one of these words to make a compound word. Remember, only use each one once. Pause the video there and see if you can do that for me. Off you go. Okay, let's see what we've got. So first of all, we have the word rain. Alright, so what word from this list can we join rain to make it a compound word, one word by itself? Well, rain ship? No. Rain paste? No. Raincoat? Yes, that's a thing, isn't it? It's a rain coat, a coat that you use in the rain. So the strategy I was using is trying each of the words from this list on and seeing which one works. Almost like you're trying on t-shirts when you go and buy some new clothes. We've got the rain and coat, so those two join. We've now got tooth. So which of these second words connects to tooth? Is it tooth ship or is it toothpaste? Well, straight away I think we know it's toothpaste, isn't it? And that leaves us, if whiteboard, raincoat and toothpaste, that leaves us with space ship being our next compound word. There you go. Those should have been the three words that you created from these two sets of words. Well done if you got those ones correct. Good job. Alright, let's move down to our main task of today, and we've got these 5 very interesting characters, haven't we? We've got a muscly unicorn here. We've got Albert Einstein, a very clever scientist. We've got a lady here leaning on what looks like to be a television set. We've got a monster zombie here, and we've got a girl here who's looking a little bit upset, and she's blowing some bubble gum. So we've got these 5 different characters, and today our job is to write a character description. And I've added this little bit as well. I've said describing each detail with multiple sentences, and you'll see what I mean by that a little later on. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to model some writing for you. I'm going to give you some examples, and then I'd like you to have a little go of writing your own character description. Now, I'm going to pick one of these characters to describe. You don't have to pick the same character as me. You can pick whichever one is your favourite, but you can look at how I create the description to help you, okay? So I think I'm going to describe this character, the Albert Einstein scientist character. I think he's the one that I'm going to describe, okay? And remember from last time, we've got all of our symbols here helping us to remember we can do smell, sound, sight, touch, taste, think, dialogue, action or feelings. We can use any of those to create some writing. So with the character description, I think I'm mainly going to be using smell, sound, sight, and maybe a bit of touch. Probably won't be doing taste, doesn't seem appropriate really. Might do a little bit of thinking, probably won't do any dialogue, might do a little bit of action, maybe if I want to show how he does something, and might do a little bit of feeling, whoops, but I think these ones down here are going to be the main ones that I use. So, I'm doing this crazy scientist. So I'm going to write a character description, but here it says describe each detail with multiple sentences. And what that means is I'm not just going to talk about his hair, for example, and then just use one sentence and then move on to something else. For every one thing I decide I'm going to describe, I'm going to use more than one sentence, at least two, to describe that thing, and that means that my writing can link together really nicely and flow, and it doesn't feel like I'm jumping around everywhere, okay? So the first thing I need to do is I need to look at my character, and I need to decide what I want to describe. So let's have a little look at the character. What things do we think I'm going to want to describe? Well, I think the thing that stands out the most for me is his bushy white hair. So I think I'm going to start with that. Now, just like we were doing with the setting description, I'm going to start with a basic sentence first of all. He had bushy white hair. Absolutely lovely. There's nothing wrong with that sentence, but I bet I can make it even better with lots of different techniques, okay? So first of all, you might remember this from last time, I might add a little phrase at the beginning describing where I would find his bushy white hair. So I might say placed, or on the top of his head, on the top of his head, and use that as my little phrase to describe where I would find his hair. On the top of his head, he had bushy white hair. Now, what I would say to year sixes is that, you know, some people might be like, well, obviously that's where he's going to find it. So we might be able to add some extra little details to make it worth telling our audience that's where we find the hair. So on the top of his head, maybe we could say it was maybe a wig, and that's why we're describing why it was placed on top of his head. Maybe we could say it was kind of a bit skew-with, a bit of a jaunty angle, and maybe that's why we're describing it being placed on the top of his head. Maybe we could say placed clumsily on the top of his head. There we go. So now it's not neatly fixed on the top of his head, it's all a bit wonky, and that works for a crazy character like our mad scientist. Placed clumsily on the top of his head was a, well, I like bushy and white. Bushy, white, I'm going to go with this idea that it's a wig. I quite like that idea. Placed clumsily on the top of his head was a bushy white wig. And if you remember from last time as well, we had these sentences where we can say who, which, or where to add on a bit more information, which I might say which, maybe I could say stuck out at lots of different angles, or at a strange angle, or stuck out like he'd been electrified. Oh, that's a good one. Placed clumsily on the top of his head was a bushy white wig, which stuck out as if he had been electrified. Because when you have electric shock, your hair stands on end, just like it does when you have static electricity. You know, his hair's all stood up to attention. There we go. So I've gone from he had bushy white hair to placed clumsily on the top of his head was a bushy white wig, which stuck out as if he had been electrified. So what I've got there is I've got a what's called a prepositional phrase there telling me where it is. I've even got some extra adverbs there about what it looked like, and then I've got some adjectives in the middle there to describe what the wig looked like, and I've gone with this idea for a wig because I thought it might work. And then I have a relative clause, a who, which, where at the end. Okay, so you might have, for example, if you were doing the unicorn, for example, you might have, rather than placed clumsily on the top of his head, you might have running delicately down the back of his neck was a multicoloured flowing mane which looked like a rainbow. And then I've used the same structure just for a different character. For maybe this character, rather than say she had hair on top of her head, we could have flowing down the side of her head were long golden locks, which were dyed pink at the very ends. And there you go. Again, I've used exactly the same structure, said where it was, described it with some adjectives, and then done a who, which, where at the end for a different character. Okay, so you see we can keep using the structure that I've modelled for your sentences as well. There we go. So I've got an appearance. Now, this is the main part of what we're doing today, describing each detail with multiple sentences. I've described his hair, but I've done it in one sentence. I want to try and describe his hair in more than one sentence. I always want to see if I can add more than one sentence when I'm doing some character description. So, placed clumsily on the top of his head was a bushy white wig which stuck out as if it had been electrified. But what other details about his hair have I not really spoken about? Maybe I could talk about that it comes down to his ears. I could, if I was struggling, get rid of the word white and then talk about what colour it is. Maybe I'll do that, because that's something you might have to do as well. I'm going to get rid of the word white because it's alright to go back and edit your writing. And now actually I'm going to say it was white. But I'm not going to say that because that's really simple. But that's the basic idea of what I'm going to say. Maybe I could compare it to untouched snow. That would be nice, wouldn't it? It was all as white as snow. So placed clumsily on the top of his head was a bushy wig which stuck out as if he'd been electrocuted. It was a dazzling, I'm going to use dazzling white, like the kind of white that they advertise on the clothes washing material adverts, where they say, oh, we can get your clothes whiter than white, that kind of thing. It was a dazzling white, almost like untouched snow on the ground. Oh, actually, rather than saying on the ground, I could say it was almost like it was untouched snow piled up on his head. That would be good. It was a dazzling white, almost like not dazzling. It was dazzling white, almost like untouched snow piled on top of his separate words, on top of his head. There we go. That is my second sentence. Now I've done at least 2 sentences about one bit of description. Let's read it back and make sure it makes sense. Placed clumsily on the top of his head was a bushy wig which stuck out as if he'd been electrified. It was a dazzling white, almost like untouched snow piled on top of his head. Now what I don't like is that I've got the phrase top of his head here and top of his head here. So I might want to change one of them slightly. It was a dazzling white, almost like untouched snow, piled, maybe I could say above, piled up above his eyebrows. So there I'm giving you an idea of where the location is above the eyebrows without actually repeating on his head again. Placed clumsily on the top of his head was a bushy wig which stuck out as if he'd been electrified. It was dazzling white. It was a dazzling white colour, I think we need to say. So do you see how many times I'm going back and rereading it and making sure it makes sense? It was a dazzling white colour, almost like untouched snow piled up above his eyebrows. Love it. Fabulous. Now I could, if I wanted to, add a third sentence on there if I'm feeling inspired. I could talk about how it dangles down past his ears. For now though, I'm going to leave it and I'm going to start talking about something else. Same character, I'm going to stick with the same character, but talk about something else. I might talk about his jumper. It looks like he's wearing a bit of like a cardigan there. So I might say that. I might say he wore a blue cardigan. 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 There you go. Don't write the word cardigan very often. So, he wore a blue cardigan. what am I going to do? Well, I think I'm going to try and use maybe the same structure as I've got here. It seems to be quite a good structure to create nice sentences. So I might start off saying where the cardigan was. Now I don't want to just say on his body was a cardigan. Let's be a bit more creative that. So maybe I could say wrapped around his shoulders, yeah? Or covering his entire body. Or covering his the upper half of his body, which would be more accurate, wouldn't it? I like wrapped around his shoulders. I think that sounds quite good. So I might say wrapped around his shoulders was a wool, dark blue cardigan. Okay, there you go. I've learned how to spell cardigan this time. And you can see it's the same structure again, isn't it? Rather than saying placed clumsily on top of his head, we said wrapped around his shoulders. We're just using phrases to tell us where we would find those items. Then we're saying what it is and adding a few adjectives in there. This time wool and dark blue. And now I'm going to try and add on my who, which, where. Wrapped around his shoulders was a wool dark blue cardigan. Well, I can actually use one other word. Who, which, where. I can use that. So I might use that this time. Now, I can use a bit of my imagination. I might say that was given to him as a present many years ago. That might be quite interesting because I can make it up. It's completely out of my own imagination. So I can add some details like that. He wrapped around his shoulders was a wool dark blue cardigan that had been given to him many years ago by I can make this really interesting, by his long lost brother. Ooh, there we go. I'm using my imagination to create a deeper character from this. Wrapped around his shoulders was a wool dark blue cardigan that had been given to him many years ago by his long lost brother. Perfect. Now, again, remembering we're always trying to describe each detail with multiple sentences today, what else can I say about the cardigan? Well, I could say something about its appearance again, like the cuffs, but we've done a lot of looking, haven't we? All these sentences here so far are about what we can see. So maybe we could do a smell or a sound. Maybe we try and combine the smell and sound together with an and then we could have almost 3 full sentences, couldn't we? So maybe maybe it smells damp and musty, like when a piece of clothing's been stuffed in the back of the drawer for too long. It smells a little bit odd, a little bit off. Maybe we do that. A musty, damp smell came from I don't want to say the cardigan again. Maybe from the piece of clothing. And now, what noise would it make? Maybe what noise would it? Maybe it kind of rustles. Does wool rustle? Is that a sound wool makes? Maybe it scrapes together almost. Ooh, not really so sure what sound wool makes. Maybe we could say it makes like kind of like almost a stretching noise, as if it's a bit too small for him. I think that might be a good idea. A musty, damp smell came from the piece of clothing, and well, if it was too small for him and it's kind of squeaked when he walked? Oh well, when he walked. And when he walked. Now I'm going to add some commas for what's called parenthesis, but you don't need to worry about that. When he walked, it made a small squeaking mouse. Mouse? I said mouse because in my head I was like, oh, we could use a simile about a mouse, but I jumped a few words ahead. It made a small squeaking noise, almost like a mouse. See, mouse was coming, it was just not not at that point. So what I've done there is I've made well, if I got rid of this and I've essentially made 3 separate sentences, but I'm not going to do that because I like using and to connect information. I've said, wrapped around his shoulders was a wool, dark blue cardigan that had been given to him many years ago by his long-lost brother. A musty, damp smell came from the piece of clothing, and when he walked, it made a small squeaking noise, almost like a mouse. There we go, and I'm going to combine that piece of writing with the piece of writing above. And we've started to create a character description, but what's lovely is that we're not jumping from description to description. We're hanging on to a piece of description and doing it in detail. Again, you can use this structure to any of the characters. Let's say we were looking at this lady down here. I could say wrapped around her shoulders, or covering her shoulders was a peach coloured, was maybe a light pink blazer, which that had been bought for her by her husband. A beautiful, fragrant smell came from the piece of clothing, and when she walked past, maybe the expensive material slid together without a noise. There you go. You can, I'm coming up with that off the top of my head. You can do anything with this structure. Should we try the zombie? If I was doing a zombie, maybe I could say hanging around his body was a tattered, blood-covered t-shirt or maybe we could say wrapped around his, covering his body was a white, blood-stained t-shirt that had been tattered and torn, full stop. A dirty, earthy smell came from the creature, so I might not describe the creature's clothing, I could say, and when he dragged his body along, rather than saying walked, it smelled of decay and mould. There you go. So I've used the same structure for all the different characters, and it just takes a while to think, right, what would this smell of, and how do we put this together? So I've not really written that much today, just a very, very tiny paragraph there, but it's full of great descriptions. We read it one more time. Placed clumsily on the top of his head was a bushy wig which stuck out as if it had been electrified. It was a dazzling white colour, almost like untouched snow piled up above his eyebrows. Wrapped around his shoulders was a wool, dark blue cardigan that had been given to him many years ago by his long-lost brother. A musty, damp smell came from the piece of clothing, and when he walked, it made a small squeaking noise, almost like a mouse. I've realised I've written almost like twice, so I'm going to get rid of the almost. I'm just going to say like a mouse. I'm going to be definitive about that. Okay, there you go. That's what I'd like you to do. Now notice how many times I went back, read over, changed what I was doing. That's absolutely fine. You're not going to get it perfect the first time around. It takes a couple of tries, okay? What I would like you to do is pick a character, maybe pick 1 or 2 different things that you could describe about that character, and try and write about those descriptions in more than 1 sentence, at least 2. Spend at least 2 sentences on each thing that you want to describe, okay? It's tricky work today, year 1 and year 2, but I know you'll do a fantastic job, alright? See you tomorrow, where we'll do a little bit of reading. Ooh, see you later, bye!